5 days ago, my girlfriend of 6 years and I got married in a small and intimate ceremony. It was initially just supposed to be our families and a couple of really close friends, but unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, my family could not make it. To be more precise, my family could have made it, but to them, taking a family vacation to Australia with my brother and his family seemed like more of a priority to them. My wife and I have been together for 6 years and we got engaged about 10 months ago. We hadn't formally invited anyone or sent out the invitations until 4 weeks ago, but we knew when we wanted to get married. And both of us had informed our families 8 months in advance so they could keep their calendars clear when our wedding finally rolled around. My parents had reassured me that they would keep that in mind, and honestly, I hadn't expected them to do what they eventually did. But I guess I should have expected it because I have always had kind of a strained relationship with my parents. I grew up in a family where my brother had the reputation of being the gifted kid and I was just the troublemaker. My brother is 8 years older than me and he has always been better at every single thing, be it his grades or sports or other activities. So of course, I felt a little overshadowed by him when I was little, but I felt like that feeling would go away eventually. And it might have if my brother had been a less arrogant person, but he just seemed to constantly try and rile me up on purpose. He would always mock me and bully me with his friends, and I was a particularly small kid, so it was quite easy for him to do so. I would always try to complain to our parents, but they never even bought it, since to them, my brother was the perfect kid and he was probably incapable of even making mistakes. So that went on for quite a while, and by the time I reached high school, I had so much built up resentment against my brother that I would go out of my way to create trouble whenever I could, because if I couldn't be as great as my brother then I would be remembered in other ways. Right from my childhood, I had developed a bit of a rebellious streak, and it only got worse as I grew up. By then, my brother already had a job, and even then, he couldn't stop constantly trying to show off. And then one day, after I had graduated from high school, he said something really snarky about me being a disappointment or something, and I just lost it. He had been cruising for a bruising for a really long time, and that day, we finally duked it out. That was almost 10 years ago, and since then, we have not spoken. I'm pretty happy about it because honestly, I think my life got much better after I stopped speaking to him. And I think I got a lot more anger against him out of my system the day that I beat him up. I got pretty beat up too, but I was happy that at least I had given him a black eye that he totally deserved. Of course, after that, my parents were very upset with me because they thought that I had instigated him and picked a fight with him on purpose. They had never been ready to believe that it was always my brother who was riling me up and trying to get me to fight with him, and even on that day, they did not believe me. They were very cold to me for the next couple of weeks, and things only started getting better when I left for college, probably because they were going to be empty nesters after that and they wanted to fix things with me before I left. But I never forgot about the way they had treated me, and even though I kept in touch, I just couldn't let go of how unfairly they had treated me in comparison to my brother. The only reason I had even invited them to my wedding was because they were the only family that I had. I'm not particularly close to any of my relatives, and my grandparents, unfortunately, are no longer with us. And in spite of our strained relationship, we had made an effort to actively keep in touch with each other over the past 10 years. They tried to get me to fix things with my brother as well, several times, but I don't think either of us was interested. He got married about 6 years ago and he has 2 kids now. I was not invited to his wedding and I didn't even care. My parents even tried to get me to invite him to my wedding this time, but that was definitely not happening. I know that he's still the arrogant and insufferable brat that he used to be because we have to see each other on the holidays when we go back home, and his behavior has not changed in the slightest. The only difference is that we don't acknowledge the existence of the other anymore. I'm also still aware of the fact that my parents do have a soft corner for him, more than they do for me, but I still hadn't expected them to just take off on vacation with him and his family and never even care that I was going to get married around the same time. And I can't prove it, but I'm pretty sure that he did this on purpose because he knew that if it really came down to it, our parents would definitely choose them over me because that's what they had done all our lives. He probably wanted me to feel bad, and in a way, he succeeded because right now, I feel like absolute crap about all my decisions. Anyway, a couple of weeks ago, right around the time that we sent out the formal invitations, my parents visited me and told me that they probably wouldn't be able to attend because just 3 days back, my brother had invited them to join them on their family vacation to Australia. And this was going to be an all-paid vacation since it was a perk for my brother, since he had really impressed one of his clients and he wanted to take his entire family with him. So it's not like they could postpone it because my brother had already taken the time off, and so, my parents expected me to postpone my wedding since it was only going to be friends and family, and we were getting married in a venue that belongs to one of my wife's relatives. Obviously, it would be more reasonable for them to expect me to postpone my actual wedding than for them to decline the vacation. They told me that they were really excited and looking forward to spending some time with their grandkids, and they hoped that I would understand. I wanted to argue with them so badly, but instead, I just smiled at them and I told them, okay, I'll wait. They were so clueless that they didn't even think that I didn't actually mean it and seemed satisfied with my response, so they left. I spoke to my wife about it, and even she was quite shocked because we had always known that my brother was more important to them, but for them to so blatantly push me to the sidelines was just so disrespectful. Obviously, we had no intention of waiting or postponing our wedding, and we decided that we were going to just go through it with or without them. So 5 days back, around the time that we were supposed to get married, we went through with the wedding and we even posted about it in the evening. And that came as a huge shock to my parents because I had promised them that I would wait and I didn't. When they saw the photos, they immediately started calling me and texting me, but I ignored them because that was the day of my wedding, and I didn't even bother to read the messages until the next day. The next morning, when I woke up, I read the text that they had sent me, and it was exactly what I had expected. They were telling me that they were very disappointed in me and that they hadn't expected me to betray them like this, so I decided to contact them and speak to them about what happened because I really had a lot of things to say to them, and I'm sure that they could say the same for me. It didn't take long for them to answer my phone call, and as soon as they picked up, they started shouting at me and said that they had never felt as insulted as they had the day before because everyone was shocked that I hadn't invited them to my wedding. Since I wasn't close to the rest of my family and I was also a bit of an introvert, nobody had expected to be invited to my wedding, but all of them had apparently believed that my parents would be there for sure and had been surprised when they saw the pictures and my parents were nowhere to be found. So everyone in the family had a lot of questions, and it was so typical of my parents to care more about what other people thought than about what they had put me through. Anyway, I decided to speak my mind to them, and I told them that I had no intention of waiting for them to return from their vacation with my brother and his family, even if I had said that. Because I knew that arguing with them would be pointless since it was not like they were going to decline to go on vacation with their golden child and his family, even if it meant skipping my wedding. And I already had a lot on my plate, so it's not like I had the energy to argue with them, and that's why I had promised them that I would wait. In my opinion, I was completely justified in what I was doing, and I did not owe them an explanation. I also brought up everything that had happened in the past, how they had never believed that my brother was a horrible human being who was just as arrogant, and they had always treated me unfairly. Even now, they could not see the fact that my brother had specifically picked this time to ask them to join them for the vacation because he knew that he was more special to them, and if he could get my parents to skip my wedding, that would be the biggest win for him. That's exactly what happened, so my parents had proven to me once and for all that my brother was more important to them than me. And now, they no longer had any right to question me about my decisions because I was done with them and I was not going to be cast aside anymore. Then, I was about to hang up, but my parents told me that apparently my brother had no idea that I was getting married around the same time and said that if I had told them that I wanted them to be there at my wedding and that I wasn't ready to wait, then they would have declined the vacation and been with me instead. However, instead of being transparent with them, I decided to play mind games, and now, I was acting like a victim in the situation, even though I had created it for myself. I wasn't expecting that reaction from them, so I decided to speak to them a little more, and they told me that apparently, they hadn't even told my brother that I was getting married, and since I hadn't invited the rest of my family, neither had they known. So he had no idea that I was getting married around the same time that he was going on vacation, and he had invited them without any ulterior motives. Apparently, they had only decided to speak to me because they knew that if they declined to go on vacation with my brother and his family, it would be unlikely that they would get an opportunity like this anytime soon in the future since my brother has been very busy ever since he started his own business. So that's why, instead of just declining without talking to me, they decided to talk to me and asked me if I would be comfortable with the idea of postponing my wedding for a couple of weeks, and if I had said no, and be honest with them, they would have declined the vacation and been there with me for the wedding. As for whatever had happened in the past, they told me that they were ready to accept that they had kind of been at fault for never acknowledging that maybe my brother could have been terrible to me and I might have been telling the truth. But I never helped the situation for myself because I always went out of my way to create trouble, seek attention in the most drastic ways, and try to be a nuisance in the family. So I couldn't exactly blame it all on them for not believing me when I tried to make it sound like my brother was always coming after me. And when they put it that way, I couldn't help but think that maybe they had a point. However, at that moment, I was in no mood to believe them, so I accused them of bluffing about whether my brother had known that I was getting married or not. Even if he had known, there was no way that my parents were going to tell me about it after I had accused him of doing this on purpose. And I argued with my parents and I told them that if they had really wanted to be present at my wedding, Then they wouldn't even have asked me if I would be fine with postponing it, and they would have just been there for me, no questions asked. They wouldn't even have entertained the idea of going off on vacation with my brother and his family while abandoning me. I accused them of making up excuses to cover up their mistakes and trying to gaslight me into thinking that I was not the victim, but the one who was at fault for the situation. I thought they were going to argue with me, but instead, they just told me that I still hadn't grown out of my old face, and I was still the troublemaker who went out of my way to seek attention in the worst possible ways. Then, they just hung up, and I could tell that they were very disappointed, and my mother had actually been crying because it had come as a huge shock to her that while she was on vacation, I had just posted a bunch of my wedding photos like it meant nothing, but even I was really upset and mad at them. I didn't even bother to think about anything from their perspective for the first couple of days, but now, the more that I think about the conversation that I had with my parents, the less confident I feel that I might have been in the right. At first, I was very sure of myself that I hadn't done anything wrong, but now, I don't know anymore. Obviously, there's no way to prove whether my brother had known when I was getting married and whether he had done all of this on purpose or not, but I have a strong gut feeling that my parents must have told him that I was getting married around this time, and he had specifically picked this time to go on vacation with his family and invite my parents to accompany him. It was just too suspicious, but that's all I have to go on my gut feeling. And I don't really know for a fact whether what I think is true or not. So on the off chance that it's not, I guess I did mess up in a way. But that's the issue, I'm not sure of anything. I would still like to say that if my parents truly wanted to be there for me on my wedding day, they never would have even entertained the idea of going off on vacation with my brother and his family, and they wouldn't even have asked me to postpone my wedding. However, if I had spoken to them, then the situation might have turned out differently. I don't know. The only thing that I don't know for sure is that they were right about one thing. I never made it easier for them to take my side when I was younger because I was definitely a troublemaker and a total brat. My brother had always been a goody two-shoes, no matter how much he bullied me in private. He always did his best in everything, and that's not something that I can take away from him. So maybe if I had put my energy into trying to be more like him, who knows, maybe my parents would have found it easier to be on my side. Anyway, I'm just really confused about everything, and I don't know if I owe my parents an apology. All my life, I've believed that my brother was treated better because my parents were biased toward him, but maybe I never made it for myself, and maybe I'm not really the victim here. And even now, I'm not even sure if my brother had known about when the wedding was going to take place or not. I just don't know anything, so I desperately need some clarity. Ida for telling my parents that I would wait for them to come back from vacation but getting married without them eventually. Update 1. So my parents returned from their vacation, and as soon as they landed, they came directly to my house from the airport. I know that because I could see their bags and stuff with them when they turned up in the cab. My wife and I have been married for a little over a week now, and we have discussed the situation with my parents several times. I've also gone through the comments, spoken to a bunch of my friends, and a lot of people are on my side, and a lot of other people also think that I could have avoided all of this drama. But the bottom line is that whatever damage had to be done has already been caused, and I don't think that my parents can move on from this, and nor can I. So I had pretty much given up any hope of reconciling with my parents, and honestly, I didn't even want to. It seemed pointless because all my life, they had always preferred my brother over me, and even they themselves had not denied it when I brought it up during our last phone call. They had accepted it, but had also tried to blame me for it in the same breath. I had accepted that both of us had different opinions, and maybe both of us were right or maybe all of us were wrong, but it didn't make a difference anymore. We couldn't take back whatever had happened. And that was how I had planned on dealing with the situation, but I guess my parents had different plans. When they showed up at my door, I was very confused because they still had their bags and stuff with them, and I thought that they were coming here to live with me, so that scared me a little bit, but later on, they clarified that they had to come directly to my house from the airport. Anyway, I had invited them and they skipped all the small talk and told me that for my behavior, it was very obvious that we had a lot to talk about if we wanted our family to work. I didn't know what to say to that, because I didn't really have any plans of discussing anything with them. I already knew that there would be no point and we would get stuck talking in circles once again. So I tried to tell them that I needed some time and space away from them to get my thoughts in order, but they told me that they had made the effort to come directly to me after their vacation, just because I was important to them, so I needed to treat them with the same importance and we needed to talk about it now. I had already been pretty upset about everything that had been going on with my family ever since I had that fight with my parents, so I was really in no mood to speak to them, and when they insisted that I treat them with the same importance and play by their rules, I started getting really angry once again. So I snapped at them and I told them that just because they were willing to speak to me right now, didn't mean that I had to do the same for them. If they had really wanted to make things right with me, they should have respected what I said about wanting some time away from them and left me alone. Things could not always work on their terms, and they needed to realize that I was my own person, not their puppet. So that led to a shouting match because even they were pretty upset, and eventually, my wife had to intervene and tell them to go home because there was no way that would ever be able to come to a conclusion like this. Before they left, though, my mother, who has always been the more emotional parent, told me that she was aware of the fact that maybe she and my father had failed somewhere as parents because otherwise, nobody would treat their parents like this, but she wanted me to remember that if they had failed as parents, even I had had some failures as their son, but they had always forgiven me and tried to make it work with me. And if they were important to me, I would try to do the same and put in an effort into making things right instead of constantly trying to prove that I am perfect and I'm always the victim while my family is the villain. I would have retaliated and said something to her as well, but like I said, she has always been the more emotional of my parents and she had tears in her eyes, so I couldn't bring myself to say anything to her. After they left, my wife calmed me down because I was still pretty upset, and since then, we have been trying to figure out a way to deal with this situation. But honestly, I'm at my wit's end right now. I don't want to villainize my parents, but I also don't think that I am the bad guy here. I'm inclined to blame my brother for creating this situation, but honestly, I still don't know if he had any part to play in it at all, and even if he did, it was ultimately my parents' decision to skip my wedding and join him on his family vacation. I feel like I'm back to square one once again now, with no idea what to do and how to deal with this problem at hand. Update 2. Before I get into this update, I just want to tell everyone who has been suggesting to just cut my parents off, it's not that easy. If it was, I wouldn't even be on the site and I would have already just done it. But families are complicated, and like I said, I really didn't have anybody, apart from my parents. And it's not like they have always been bad to me, we have had some good times as well, and it's just a complicated situation that we are in right now. I can't say that I'm perfect, but neither can I say that for them. So the only two options that I have right now are to wait for things to get so bad that I have no other option but to cut them off or talk it out with them and try to make it work, and I'm inclined to go with the second one because, well, I'm a sane person. Anyway, the last time that I met with my parents was 3 days ago, and it didn't really go well. After that, I had no idea what I was going to do, so I just thought that I would go back to my previous approach and keep things low-key with them. And my wife agreed with it because it's not like we have any better ideas on how to deal with it. But then last evening, my parents texted me and they told me that they were sorry about how they had behaved the last time that we met, and then they shouldn't have instigated me and yelled at me. They should have just left me alone when I said that I didn't want to speak to them, and they were really sorry about whatever had happened. But they still wanted to make things work with me, so they wanted to ask me if I would be willing to meet them for dinner on the weekend, and, now, my wife and I are discussing that idea. It's definitely going to be awkward, we know that for sure, because so much has happened in the past couple of weeks that there is no way that we can get through an entire evening without talking about it. But it seems to me like they are trying to make it up to me in some way, and I don't want to ruin my relationship with them, so I'm willing to give them a chance. And maybe by speaking to them, I might actually be able to salvage whatever is left of our relationship. It's very obvious that we have a lot of misunderstandings and miscommunication, which has created a lot of issues between me and my parents. But I don't want to lose them, I really just don't. So unless anything else comes up or something happens in the next couple of days, we are probably going to be seeing them this weekend and are going to try and talk it out with them. Wish us luck and hopefully, it'll go well with them. Update 3. So, unfortunately, things did not exactly go well with my parents, and I regret even giving them the benefit of the doubt and going to them, because then I showed up at their house last evening, with my wife. My brother was there with his family. They know that I do not have a good relationship with my brother at all, and I think it was pretty nasty of them to spring it on me like a surprise, regardless of what their intentions were. I was obviously very shocked to see him there, and I don't think he had been expecting me either, so they had lied to both of us. But as soon as I confronted them about it, they told me that most of the problems in our family stemmed from the fact that the two of us did not get along, because I thought that my parents treated him better than they treated me, and he thought that I was a good-for-nothing loser, and he still had a grudge against me for attacking him 10 years ago, even though he totally deserved it. So the only solution that they could think of was to have me over for dinner and have us talk it out with each other. I instantly told them that I was only here to talk to them, but I had nothing to say to my brother, and for once in our lives, both of us seemed to be on the same page. Both of us started to leave, but once again, my mother started crying and said that she couldn't believe that both of her sons valued their own pride and ego more than they valued family. I was about to say something, but I guess my brother had finally had enough of this, and he told my mother that considering the fact that she was the one who had said yes to going on vacation with his family, in spite of knowing that I was getting married around the same time, she should not be talking about family values at all. And then, out of nowhere, he told me that our parents had been lying to me all along and that he had actually known that I was getting married around the same time that he was going on vacation. The reason he had chosen to go on vacation around the same time was not because he wanted to ruin my wedding, but because he was apparently signing on a new project in a couple of weeks, and after that, he would be too busy for vacations. So he wanted to get this out of the way while he could, and it had nothing to do with me, in case, that's what I believed. But my parents still had a choice and they had chosen to go on vacation with him, and now they were throwing him under the bus and acting as if both of us were responsible for all the trouble. With that out of the way, I knew that there was no way that I could forget my parents, and I guess things had finally come to a point of no return. I had the clarity of knowing that my parents had chosen to go on vacation with my brother and his family on purpose, and I didn't really care about what his intentions were, but what I cared about was the fact that they had a choice and they sealed their fate, but then try to lie their way out of it and were actually gaslighting into thinking that I was somehow the bad guy here. Anyway, after that, I walked out and blocked them everywhere, and I don't think that I will be getting back in touch with them anytime soon. My wife and I are pretty happy on our own, and we are even going on our honeymoon pretty soon. We were initially going to wait for a couple of months, but now, I really need a break from all of this. Anyway, that's that, and I'm better off without my family.